He is UAB head coach Trent Dilfer. I am John Brice of FootballScoop.com. This is the latest Our Coaching Network podcast. Excited to be joined by Coach Dilfer today, especially coming off your first conference win there at UAB. So, congrats on that, Coach. I know you've been wanting that one for a long time, but it shows
Took
that your team, I think, is still committed.
yeah, it took a long time. It's been very frustrating season. Um, the storms of life come all the time. Sometimes they come personally, professionally, a lot of different ways. This has been for our building a real storm. We've really practiced well throughout the year. The kids have stayed resilient. We've tried to stay positive, and it just hasn't gone our way. And it was nice for the kids to get some affirmation for their hard work. I don't know if the fan really understands how much these student athletes put into this, and when it doesn't go well, it's a difficult situation. So, really happy for them.
You brought up something right there that I knew I wanted to talk with you about today, and that is the demands on a student athlete's time. Can you compare and contrast what it was like for you when you were a high level player at Fresno State versus what you see your guys go through on a day in and day out basis now, and maybe how much the year round calendar is or is not the same, and just all those variables?
Yeah, I would say when I was at Fresno, this is 100 years ago. Jeff Tedford was Jeff Tedford's first round pick out of the six. So he kind of used me as a beta test, and it was relentless. It was like professional football. I never had a break. I was always studying, lifting, throwing, work, doing something. I would say, and I was 4x what anybody on my team did. In modern day football, every player does what I did in college. It is relentless. It is, we're a morning team. So our kids are in the building by 7. They have some voluntary stuff, lifting, taping, whatever, but a lot of them will stay till 12:30, 1, studying on their own, watching tape, getting an extra lift, stretching, whatever it is. Then they got class. Now, the good thing is most of their classes are online these days. So they can kind of, if they budget their time well, they can take care of their academics on their own schedules. But it's 6 days a week. It's a lot of extra stuff. They meet as groups. It's very, very time consuming and fatiguing for a student athlete.
Well, and one thing, even if the 24-hour clock is similar for what you underwent and what they now go through, there was no social media when you were playing. How much does that complicate the equation, or how much time do you or someone in your staff have to spend dealing with some of the pratfalls of social media?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I raised 3 college athletes, so all 3 of my daughters were Division I volleyball players. So I got a little bit of an understanding from their lives, their teammates' lives, the what a college athlete goes through social media. I think the hardest thing is the criticism and the praise, the over criticism and the over praise. They're either made out to be superheroes or they're made out to be villains. They're horrible people or they're great people. And that's just a bad way to live your life, because we're neither. So their perspective gets warped by it. Then the amount of time they spend on it, so much of it is, whether it's our players, other players, is look at us, right? Look at me. So the amount of time they spend crafting their posts, I think, is probably not very healthy. And then just it's become this, any downtime they have, the phone is their friend. And, we talk about it. We've tried to educate more than anything. I'm not going to make rules around it. I think that's silly. But just trying to educate best practices and how social media can be used for good. I learned the hard way at ESPN that, you get into these bickers on social media and it's the bottom feeders that really care. But you can use it for power too, and you can use it for goodness. And we've tried to educate them on that. So it's a difficult situation. It's definitely something that you look at your team sometimes, you're like, hey, why are they not there with us? And a lot of times because they're buried for so long on their phone, they lose the ability to have human interaction. But it's that way for all of us. I think all of us are tempted by it.
And along those lines, I want to follow up. You said you don't make rules surrounding it because you think it's silly or something like that. Is that to empower your players, or what's the thought process behind that approach?
Yeah, I try to do most things I do are standard based and education based. They're young men. They need to make decisions. They need to understand the consequences of their decisions. So it's like not letting your toddler make a mistake or your 10-year-old strike out or your 12-year-old, not letting your 12-year-old daughter deal with some of the middle school drama, and you try to jump in and save them from pain. You try to save them from mistakes. I think that's a terrible way to parent. They need to learn how to self-regulate. They need to learn how to get through difficult situations. They need how to learn how to say no to bad things. It's the same with the young adult. We need to educate them on the dangers of it, how it could take away from their human performance, how it could take away from their ability to create value for themselves. I think Coach Saban, one of the best things he did, and I hope most coaches do this, is he always talked about creating value for yourself as a player. Your diploma, right, creates great value for you. What you are to the public facing creates value for you. And now with the ability to monetize your name, image, and likeness, everything you're doing is either creating value or taking value away. So I think you can use social media fits into that. Time spent on it. Are you creating value for yourself if you come to practice tired? Are you creating value for yourself if you're getting into bickering matches on Instagram? You know, understand that if you're a possible NFL player, they're going to find out everything you ever did on social media, and it might determine if they draft you in a round or not. So I think educating them and then letting them make some decisions, and sometimes some bad ones, is not a bad thing. And then you can come alongside them and parent them through how to make better decisions later.
He is Trent Dilfer, former Super Bowl winning quarterback, second year head coach at UAB. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. I want to follow up again, Coach, on something you just said there, and you talked about being public facing. You're very public facing as the head coach of UAB, a program that had a number of winning seasons, but also had some maybe setbacks or some limitations when you arrived there. What has maybe been tougher about the job than you might have anticipated, if anything at all? And along those lines of being public facing, how have you navigated the criticism? It's something you dealt with as a collegiate player, a pro player, and it's something you dealt with on camera at ESPN.
Yeah, I don't, that part doesn't really fit into the equation for me. I'm 52 years old. I've been booed out of Outback steakhouses and stadiums full of 100,000 people. So, um, people say they don't care what they say about you. I think everybody cares at some point. But I've learned how to not even let it get inside. Whether it's like I'm not on X, I'm not Instagram. I like for like 5 minutes a day to check in on my family, some golf stuff. Like I'm not in my DMs. I don't open my emails. I don't look at texts from people that I don't know. So like, it's not going to touch me. I don't listen to talk radio. I don't watch TV. I've probably seen 15 snaps of NFL football this year. And I do watch a lot of college football on Saturdays when we're done with an early game. But I just don't, I'm not interacting with the people that are criticizing me. So it happened at ESPN, it happened in the NFL, it happened in high school football, it's happening here. You're never going to please anybody. And if you're letting other people's opinions shape your perspective, I think you're in trouble just in general. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest issues in our country is we're letting things that we can't control and other people's opinions of us dictate our actions. So that part's just a non-factor to me. The hard part of this job is, and I think it's true with a lot of group of five jobs, is there's the haves and the have-nots. And that's just the reality of it. This is not a bad thing. But people need to understand that, you're dealing with budgets that are 1/50th, 100th. And I'm not talking operating budgets because they'll show numbers and say that's not true. No. The real money, like the money that matters in college football, there's the haves and the have-nots. And that's fine. I kind of like being a have-not. But it makes it hard. It makes it hard when um, you have coaches that have come from those programs or players that have come from those programs, and there's an expectation of what college football is, and then you're not that. So, um, I think you have to. The hardest part was identifying who fits in this program and how we're going to win every game we ever play. And we're not even close to there yet. But I said the same thing when I took over a high school program that had 36 kids and 6 of them lifted with the PVC pipe. And I would talk about how one day we'll never lose a game. And, you have to start building your building that direction, but you got to find out how to do it. And I think the challenge has been with restricted resources, with everything that's out there, the narratives that kids are following. What type of kid and coach is going to get us to that place? And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're close. I think we have a pretty good understanding now after 2 seasons of what that player is going to look like and what that coach is going to look like. And I think after this offseason, we'll be able to go get a lot of those guys. And we're developing it within the building. But that's the challenge. It's an all day, every day sucker. Like it is all day. When I go on vacation, do you know what I do? Football. When I get away in the summer for a couple of weeks, my vacation home, you know what I do? Football. My grandson and football. Like this is a 365. The calendar never ends. They could talk about the recruiting calendar. They talk about it, this. There's no off days. Sundays aren't off days. There's no Sabbaths. Like if you're trying to win in college football, you're never exhaling.
You mentioned your grandson, so I'll just ask it. I thought it was a neat moment when you had him at your press
Yeah.
conference earlier this year. And I think you had 2 reporters in the room. I talked to somebody on your campus who felt like that incident was inaccurately or unfairly portrayed. As
Yeah.
you've reflected back on it, did anything about your reaction to saying, "Hey, this isn't Alabama," which isn't a false statement, it's a reality statement. What did you learn from that, or what did you take from that, or just how have you processed that over the past few weeks?
Non-factor in my world.
Yeah.
Contextually, I was saying Georgia, Alabama played that night.
Right.
And the press conference was going to be massive, win or lose. And I assumed people understood, hey, I was talking about, hey, this isn't going to be Alabama's press conference. If I would change anything, I would have said press conference.
Sure.
But that's a non-factor to me. Like, so you upset some people that misunderstood what you said. It was a neat moment for me and my grandson. The
Right.
funny thing about that was this: my daughter, my middle daughter, who's a social influencer and very successful volleyball player and all this stuff. So she has to be on social media. She had texted me that there's been hundreds of thousands of very positive posts about that. She goes, "Oh, Dad, that was awesome with Decker. Like, people are so excited." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Great." My daughter gave me some. It was 5 minutes later that the crap hit the fan, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's the end of the world. You offended everybody." I'm like, "What? Did I do something this morning that I'm not aware of?" Um, so it was misinterpreted. It's like a lot of things. I remember being at ESPN, and you'd have 30 seconds in a comment in, and you'd leave out one word in a comment, and so people could misunderstand it. And the next day, everybody's up in arms because they misrepresented or they misunderstood what you said. And I'd always just say, go watch the whole thing. Like, just go watch the whole thing and see, try to understand what my intent is, what I was trying to say. Maybe I messed up a word. Maybe, it was mistimed. But listen, I've said things I know were going to be polarizing. They've come out of the time I said them, I knew I was intentional. I'm going to say this and I'm going to rock the flipping boat and I'm going to do it on purpose. I've done that dozens of times.
Yeah.
That was not one of those times.
Well, and to be clear, again, we're joined by Trent Dilfer, second year UAB head coach, John Brice of FootballScoop.com here on the Our Coaching Network. I want to specify before we started recording, you said, "Hey, everything's on the table. Ask me anything you want." So I appreciate that. I want our listeners to know the only ground rule you set was that there were no ground rules. Now, within that, I want to ask, because you and I have a number of mutual friends. I'm a Tennessee native. You worked miracles really in the modern world at Lipscomb Academy with what you did there before coming to UAB and making the leap from high school to college. But when I talked to people there, you talked about wanting to show them more than just being a football coach. You wanted to provide examples in all aspects of life or teach them lessons that they translated into other areas of life. And so I wonder, when you're taking your grandson up there, sure, it's a special moment for you, but on some level, were you also trying to show your players what it is to be a true family man?
Yeah, I got 10 fathers on my team. So I appreciate you saying that. You probably did not know that. I got 10 dads. So I do a lot of parenting to parents on
Wow.
my team. You know, we have a baby, one of our players' baby's young daughter is here like next door to me right now, being babysat. So yeah, it's important to me that we talk about. I show my family in videos to our players. My grandchildren run around the facility. All the kids of the parents are welcome anytime. Sorry, of the coaches, they never have to ask me. All the players' kids are welcome. Like, I've just made a blanket rule: you never have to ask me. You don't need permission. I don't care if there's 12-year-olds running down the hall playing catch. Many of them come in. If I flip my phone around, you'd see I have a nice couch, a couple love seats, 80-inch TV. I have kids come in here and watch, cartoons. It's not uncommon to walk into my office, the head coach's office, and Bluey's on. One of the kids is watching Bluey. Um, I just think it's important that they see this is bigger than football. My whole philosophy. I got asked to coach a bunch when I was at ESPN, and I never really considered it, but I had a person challenge me. They're like, "Hey, you should at least put together a coaching book." And these guys have coaching books, and basically your coaching book is your life in football, your philosophies, your culture, your rules, how you'd handle compliance, practice plans, blah, 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 blah. So I started doing it because I was on planes so much, I'd sit there and get on planes and write out stuff. So I was prepared for this when I did it because I'd done this from 2008 to 17. And I'm a big vision mission guy. You gotta have a vision where you're going. Mission is how you get there. And I just made it very clear I was going to do human development masters of football team. If I ever coach, it was going to be human development first, football team second. And then I put why. Because great football, not good football, great football is a series of dozens, hundreds of little tiny decisions that you're going to make in game. And if you're making good decisions off the field, you're probably going to make more good decisions on the field. Sure, does talent come into it? Absolutely. You're always trying to get the most talent. But the streets are littered with talented players that made really bad decisions. And the NFL's littered with players that had average talent that made great decisions. I remember doing the draft, and it was my second year. It was the year that the Seahawks drafted Sherman and all those guys. I'll never forget it. We're in a break. And I said, and we're getting ready to do, I think, the fourth round. And I got to one of the researchers in my ear and I said, "Hey, find something interesting about 4 through 7 and free agents." Because we're about to talk for, 4 straight hours on rounds 4 through 7. And then we're going to be talking about guys that are going to be priority free agents. And I want to give the audience something that they haven't gotten before, they've never heard before. So I know this is a hard task, and start here. Start with how many guys had stars in college. Start with how many years they played in college, like snaps, and kind of go down a rabbit hole. So it's about an hour later, the end of the fourth round, he gets me and goes, "Trent, thank you so much for starting me. You'll never believe what I found." I'm like, "What? This is great." And he said, the number one indicator of getting drafted in the 4th through 7th round or being a private free agent has nothing to do with what college you went to or how you were ranked out of high school. I went, "Interesting." I said, "That's going to piss off a lot of the recruiting guys." And he goes, "Actually, it's the opposite." He says, "There's more guys with stars not in the 4th through 7th round. If you talk like 3, 4, 5 stars." He said, "The biggest thing in those rounds and the guys that play in Pro Bowl," and we go to this, he says, "is snaps played in college. That's the number one indicator. So how many snaps did you play in college? Not school, not stars, not talent, any of that stuff." And I said, "Okay." And I said it, and I say, "Hey, go one more direction. Find me Pro Bowl players for the past 5 years and what rounds they were drafted in." Less than 50% of the Pro Bowl players for 5 years went in the first 3 rounds. They went
Wow.
rounds 4 through 7. more impactful than that, 25% of them were undrafted free agents at that time. Hence, yes, talent is important. Talent is amazing. It is so great when you're talented, right? And you have studs. But what you don't talk about is how many of those guys you recruit that never make it and hurt your team. What you're looking for is a great competitor that has enough talent, a great decision maker that has enough talent, a guy that has a great football IQ and is tough that has enough talent. Those are the guys that play in the NFL. Those guys play for a long time in the NFL. Now, enough is a gray word. I get that, and enough needs to be on the higher scale. I like fast. I like length. I like powerful. I like twitchy. I like bendy. Yes. But we get so enamored with potential instead of the person. And that's the number one mistake I've made, most coaches make. But a mistake, that's about a 10 minutes answer to an easy question. That's a mistake I won't make again.
So how do you ensure, or what have you learned in this process that lets you know you and your staff together will be able to avoid making that mistake or repeating that mistake multiple times moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exercises that good coaches have done. Saban's, Dabo Sweeney, I know Kurt Signetti does this. Most really good. John Summerall does a great job of this. I mean, there's great coaches in college football. You can't trust the kid or the parent. You can trust how they interact with you, but you got to talk to people that have been around them in difficult situations, not in good situations, but in difficult situations. So the math teacher, when the kid struggles in math, there's nothing wrong with struggling in math. How'd you handle it? The gym teacher that gets to see him at breaks, or the person that chaperones homecoming, how'd they handle homecoming? People in their lives. I think that's why in-person evaluations are really important. What kind of teammates are they? Do they have energy and juice when they're not on the field? How do they play without the ball? That's a big one. What's their effort like? How competitive are they when they're down 35 points? What's their body language like? Are they talking too much smack when they're up 35 points? I think all these things factor in. I used to talk to my high school team about it all the time. I think I had 9 SEC guys over time on that team. And I tell them all the time, like, you're a good player, but you're one of 15 they're looking at your position. What's gonna differentiate Edwin Spillman or Brian Longwell or Brandon Solis or Junior Sherrill or Hank Brown? Like what's gonna set you apart, CJ Jim Coley, who just now is going to LSU. Off the field stuff, what kind of teammate you are. We were beating people by 55, 60 points. Were you talking smack or were you picking them up off the ground? Were you celebrating when, Johnny went in, who's the 87th guy on our roster? What was your energy like? Or were you over on the sideline, looking up the crowd, giving hand signals or looking at your honey? I said, all those things are going to matter. And the thing I'm probably most proud of all those players I coach at Lipscomb that are now having a lot of success, is what those coaches tell me about them. They're our best special teams guys. They're our best teammates. They have moral authority. You go and look at their locker. It's perfect. They're picking up trash. They're serving in their community. They're great students. Nathan Spillman, who's one of my all-time favorite people, not just players. He gets to Tennessee and Hype's just raving about him. Kind of teammate he is. What kind of scout team player are you when you're a 5-star or 4-star, then you go to Tennessee or Vanderbilt or Auburn and you're running show team? I remember Hugh Freeze called me and said that for Hank's freshman year, he was the only person at Auburn that was 100% in everything. Like everything they asked him to do in the offseason, he was the one. He was one of one. So those are the type of people you want. Now, they're too talented to play for me at UAB, but I'm looking for those guys that can play at UAB. Once I have enough of those, we'll have Lipscomb all over again, in my opinion.
Don't want to keep you too long, Coach. I know you have a big one this week against UConn, but again, we're joined by UAB second-year head coach Trent Dilfer on the Our Coaching Network podcast. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com. Want to piggyback off of the comments you just made, very clearly speaking to the culture you had at Lipscomb Academy, a culture that helped you win 3 consecutive state championships, I believe, in your final 3 years there. How close do you think you are to having a similar, but obviously on a collegiate level, type of culture inside UAB? And you mentioned the struggles and how you deal with them, or as Marcus Freeman likes to call it, the bumpy road. How are you navigating this bumpy road? Are you reinvigorated by it, or where are you now that you have 6 wins midway through your second season at UAB?
Yeah, well, number one, I love the battle, and I will. I'm not a big promoter. John's a friend. I would encourage everybody to read this book. It's called The One Truth. I give out copies. He sent me like 50. I have two left. This one and one over there. This book, I think everybody in college football, high school football should read, because you got to love the battle. You got to love the process. You got to be energized by all the difficult things. It's never easy. I don't know how far we are. I'd be lying if I told you that. I'm seeing signs of it, but it's inconsistent. I think when I knew we had it at Lipscomb, there were two moments. Number one was when Joey, who's my director of football operation, I'm sorry, director of football affairs, kind of my right hand man, both in at ESPN and here. We didn't have to remind them of their daily responsibilities for like 2 straight weeks. We didn't send out a daily reminder and everything got done. Like, okay, we're close. Then it was when Edwin and Nate and Junior and Chauncey and those guys started policing the team. They were the ones that were, hey, there's a standard. We live to the standard. You don't leave your jeans on the floor of the locker room. You hang them on the hook. Basic stuff. You clear your plate after spaghetti dinner, and then you go around and you wipe down all the player tables and put the chairs in. When a female walks by, you stop, you say hi, you respect them, you open the door. You don't watch crap on your phone. You're not sitting there watching some inappropriate YouTube thing on your phone around team. I go on and on and on. We had standards, no rule. In fact, I don't think I had a rule at Lipscomb. I had standards. And when I didn't have to remind them, they started doing it. And the big key was this: one day practice was getting ready to start, and we had a big patio up outside my office. And the coaches were up there, were just meeting briefly. I said, hey, let's stay up here for a sec, see if practice will start without us. And we looked at our watches, and we're supposed to be down there for dynamic warm-up. And I think it was Edwin just started dynamic warm-up on his own. And then it was perfect. And then they were supposed to go to Indy. And they went and got Indy, and they didn't have coaches, so they set up the bags. And we sat there for about 15, 18 minutes, and practice was better than if we were there. These are 14 to 17-year-old kids that didn't need babysitting. They understood that they were there in that moment to maximize the time they could get practicing, because we were going to go smoke FRA or CPA or wherever we were going to go smoke that week. But they knew if we didn't do the work, like, this is who we are and this is why we're good. And we're scared to death that if we don't do the work, that we might get smoked. That's when I knew we'd never lose a game. And I'm not close to that here, but you're starting to see signs. In fact, I got a player outside my office just text me while we're on this. He's one of my team leaders. He's going to talk to me about these same things. He's frustrated that not everybody's doing these things. But instead of me telling them to do them, like, I can tell them anything you want. Show them how to build a great culture. I can show you how to win every game. You got it. I don't play anymore. The coach has all the power, no control. So I could say things, but I can't control any of it. So I want to raise leaders within my program that can do that.
A couple of points you've made on the podcast that have made me smile. Number one, you just hurt a lot of my friends' feelings by bringing up those wins against FRA and CPA and a number of those. And then my godson Spencer's favorite show is Bluey. So shout outs for both of those. That makes the podcast extra entertaining. My last two questions, especially knowing you have a player outside your office waiting for us to wrap up. Number one, I wonder if you've talked to Deion Sanders any. You obviously have the similarities that everyone has discussed. Have you talked to him any during this process? Did you have a relationship with Deion or anything like that?
I've known Prime for a long time. I worked with the NFL Network before I went to ESPN. Interesting. The very first text I got after my first win 2 years ago was from Prime. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of his. I've DM'd him with texted him a couple times. I could try to leave him alone. I love what he's doing. I love how bold he is. I love he does it his way. Well, it's not my way. Like it's not the way I would do, but I'm not prime either. You know what I mean? Like I'm the like the runt of the litter in professional athletes coaching. Um, so I don't try to be like prime, but we're very similar in this way. We both first believe about the development of the kid. And
Yeah.
people can say whatever they want about prime. I know that to be fact. Like he
Yeah.
cares about every kid in his program. Now, does he have a hard edge with some of them? Absolutely. But I think these kids need a hard edge. They need hard parenting. Um, he loves them. He's built his program faith-based, which is the way I've built mine. He understands he's trying to raise NFL athletes. You know, if you're going to Colorado right now, your prime objective is to get to the NFL and then win a bunch of games while you're at Colorado. And he understands that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm kind of doing the same thing here. I'm trying to find the diamond in the rough player that isn't recruited by the power fours that has NFL ceiling and get him in 4 or 5 years. I have a tackle right now that hasn't played much for us, but I still think he's going to play in the NFL. He's only 2 years in, and I recruited him to play in the NFL. It's going to be a hard process, but I think we can get him there. So we both want to help these kids create generational wealth if they can play in the NFL. We want them to have great impacts in their communities if they're not. We want them to create value for themselves, like Coach Saban said years ago, and I really believe in that. And I personally I have a little bit, I want to parent boys. You know,
Yeah.
people don't know my story. I lost my son when he was 5.5. So I raised these three amazing daughters, 28, 25, 21, amazing. Got to do the athletic thing. They're all married. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I never got to go through some of this stuff as a father with these kids. So with a son. So I really do look at these boys as my sons. They know that. There's days they don't think I'm a very nice dad. But then also I'll cry with them and I'll love on them and I'll help them through their stuff. And that's really rewarding for me. And I know Prime has a similar philosophy there. So it's not working. I'm not winning. I get that, and it may maybe my leash here isn't long and I won't get to do it. But I'm not going to change who I am, and I have total conviction on this is how I'm going to do it, and I do believe it'll turn around.
Yeah, that's a similarity you absolutely share with Prime. There's an authenticity there. You know, his director of player personnel, Corey, is from Nashville. You probably
Yep.
know Corey as well.
Yep.
And again, Prime demands an accountability that I think is real that maybe the outside doesn't see. Last one, because you've been incredibly, remarkably generous with your time and your candor. You referenced earlier the discrepancies in budgets, and there are football programs out there with $100 million budgets, and there are G5 programs out there struggling to have $5 million budgets, more or less. So, do you think G5, and I know you're a fierce competitor, do you think G5 should be its own entity, or are you fine with it having one seat guaranteed at the CFP table and go where it may?
I don't know the answer to that. I learned at ESPN, shut up when you don't have an answer. Because so many times I had a bad answer, because I really wasn't convicted. I don't know the answer there. Like if you asked our commissioner, he'd say, Trent, please say, and I love Tim Pernetti. I think he is going to take the American
Yeah.
Conference places that it could never dream of going. Like this is a dude now. Like
Yeah.
I would argue we have the best commissioner in all of football, considering the
Yeah.
challenges that he has. He
Yeah.
would say, no, we need to be the next Power Five. And I kind of agree with that. Like if all the institutions said, hey, we want to elevate this to the Power Five, economically they could, right? But they're choosing not to. The reality of it is, I don't know. Like it sounds kind of cool sometimes, or like Group of Five playoff and all that stuff, but then it also sets you in kind of like the runt of the litter group, right? So I really don't know the answer to that. I know we played Arkansas this year. If we played them 10 times, they're going to beat us 9. We could have beat them. We had them beat. Like we kind of imploded, but we played really darn good there to get a lead, and they didn't play very good. They bumbled the ball around. They threw interceptions. They made dumb mistakes. So you're not as close as a lot of people think, because what's Arkansas, 500 SEC team right now?
Yeah.
But I do like the carrot out there. Like I think Army's really flipping good. Like
Yeah.
And I'm surprised Rice beat Navy, but I think Army's really, I think Tulane's really good. Like Tulane, they will. John Summerall is one of my favorite people. I don't ever want to get in a fight with John Summerall, and I consider myself. There's very few fights I've ever lost.
Yeah.
Right. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I think I'd lose to him. Like that's a tough dude, man. And
Yeah.
his team is tough, and they are physical and fast. They look like a Power 5 team. But even saying that, I don't know if they can handle some of these teams. Like there's a giant discrepancy. And so I don't know where I land on it for all those reasons. And then economically, I mean, it's not even,
Yeah.
they spend more on travel than we'll spend in operating and travel combined.
Yeah.
They'll spend more in NIL than our entire football budget.
Yeah.
Right? They'll
Right.
spend more on their fueling stations than
Yeah.
we'll spend on all food in the program. One locker costs what our entire locker room costs. Like we have amazing facilities at UAB. Like they really are. If you haven't been to UAB and you haven't been to Protective Stadium, and our facility was built in 2018,
Yeah.
at our level, we have some of the best facilities.
Right.
But it's still not even close
Right.
to what these big schools have. And I'm not complaining. I like it. Like I'm also the guy that played in Tampa when we were in a trailer. Like
Yeah.
I never got to be part of the great facilities in Tampa. We were in a trailer and sent 9 guys to the Pro Bowl and won a playoff game. Being in a trailer and having our weight room outside didn't make me flinch. Listen, you're here to get dressed, go to meetings, practice football, watch film, and leave. It doesn't have to be a country club.
Yeah. I call it you're in a caviar climate with a sardine budget. So
That's good. Yeah.
anyway, Coach Trent Dilfer, incredible insight, incredible candor. Thank you so much for the visit here on the Our Coaching Network podcast. Congrats on the win last week. I know you were wanting it a heck of a lot sooner than you got it, but you got it. Your team has not folded. You nearly upset USF a couple of weeks before that. Good luck this week against UConn. Thanks for the time.